Friends, thank you for your patience. The good thing is it's cooler in here than it is backstage, so you're all good. Good evening. My name is Raymond Simonson. I look out and see 99% familiar faces, so I'll keep my introduction to just that. It is my great privilege to be the CEO of JW3, the home for Jewish culture and conversation, and we're really honoured this evening to be hosting this very special event. If I can just do the quick housekeeping and ask you that if you haven't already, we gave you extra time to turn your phones onto silent, or God forbid, off completely. Radical thought. If you do take any pictures, please just make sure your flash is off. That would be really helpful. Thank you very much. Did any of you here read the astonishing Washington Post op-ed that Ashley wrote that came out on Friday? Okay. If you did, you'll know exactly why when we had this opportunity to host Ashley here this evening, introduced by a couple of rabbis in LA that I know and that know JW3, and said to Ashley, you must come to JW3 when you're in London. When we were given the opportunity, we knew we had to make something happen here this evening. Because these conversations are timely, they're important. At a time where conversation out there is so febrile and where communities are being pitted against communities, Ashley's voice is going to be an increasingly important voice, not just in the Jewish community, but in wider society. So I'm going to ask you this evening to enter into the spirit of this with curiosity, ready to listen, and to have respectful dialogue. We're going to have a conversation that will start between Ashley and I, but then we will, after about 45 minutes, we're going to open that conversation to you. And I'll explain more at the time, but rather than just doing a traditional Q&A, we're going to see if we can make it a bit more of a conversation between us, because Ashley's here not just to share her own work, which is really vital work, but also to listen. She's made that really clear to me. So I'd encourage us all to think of ourselves as participants rather than as an audience. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite Ashley to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and the journey that brought you here, and maybe what you hope to gain from your visit to Britain. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. It is a true honor. It is also my first time here, not just at JW3, but in your beautiful country. And so it has been an incredible 24 hours thus far, taking in stock of this space. A little bit about myself. I will have some remarks to share with you that will tell you a lot about my broader work and what I'm doing here specifically. But I straddle the fence between entertainment and social activism. So in television, work as a writer and a producer in TV and film back home in Los Angeles. And then I also started a nonprofit, Push the Next Generation, which is what has brought me here. And I don't want to take away from my own remarks by sharing a little bit more about that, but I'm happy to engage in what makes sense.
Please, the lectern is yours. Ashley's going to kick off with some opening remarks, and then we'll get into the conversation. So please give a warm welcome to Ashley Jackson.
My arrival in London today begins the second half of a 2-week journey across Europe, the first of what I have named Hope Missions, in honor of my father, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. I came on behalf of Push the Next Generation, the organization I lead, to bear witness to the struggles that shaped the last century and to ask what they require of the next. To recover the international legacy my dad spent 6 decades building, to sit with people across communities who are asking how solidarity holds under strain, and to engage the global coalition this work has always needed. For most of my life, I heard my father close speeches, sermons, interviews, and even the most ordinary of conversations with the same exhortation: keep hope alive. The phrase became so familiar that its radical demands disappeared beneath the sound of it. Then in February, he passed away, and I have begun to hear his words differently, listening now from inside my own grief. In the months since, I have been living inside of what our Jewish tradition calls with such tenderness, a house of mourning. Long before I completed my conversion, I had already begun to mourn Jewishly. Week after week on Shabbat, I whispered my father's name during the Mishabera. Afterward, I stood in that same sanctuary and said Kaddish, and a congregation answered me. Before I learned many of the other dimensions of Jewish practice, I understood this, that grief is not meant to remain solitary, that it is meant to be carried, witnessed, and shared. My own mourning has not made me an authority on suffering. It has, however, altered the way I encounter it. My grief has enlarged my capacity to see the sorrow other people carry. That is the person who arrived in Europe 6 days ago. Over the past week, I have traveled from Paris to Amsterdam and now to London, immersing myself in the intertwined histories of empire and resistance, faith and doubt, violence and human dignity, histories that have shaped not only this continent, but also the moral architecture of the modern world. I have spent my days in archives and museums, churches and synagogues, in conversations with historians and clergy, scholars and artists, and with young people. In Paris, I traced the histories of the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism, confronting the bureaucratic machinery by which the unimaginable, rendering African lives as cargo in commerce, was made to appear merely administrative. I listened to people who have given their lives to the recovery of stories that others labored to erase. I have wept more in these 6 days than I had anticipated. I have wept over the atrocities I knew well and over atrocities I had never before encountered. I have wept not only at what human beings have proven capable of doing to one another, but because to stand in the very places where these histories unfolded is to watch the comfortable distance between then and now collapse. Then I walked into the secret annex, where the Frank family hid during World War II, and where Anne Frank wrote the diary the world would not read until after her death. Here was a young girl living under conditions that defy comprehension, and still she continued to write. I found myself wondering how one continues writing when their future remains entirely uncertain. This journey bears my father's imprint in its very name, yet it was not until I stood in Anne's room that I heard those words again with the force I could not ignore. Keep hope alive. There I realized that hope is often misunderstood. We have a tendency to speak of it as though it were optimism, as though it were merely confidence that things will improve. But Anne's diary survived precisely because hope is something deeper than certainty. Hope works in two directions. Yes, we are called to keep hope alive, but hope also keeps something alive in us. It preserves our capacity to imagine beyond the walls that confine us. It sustains the conviction that cruelty need not have the final word. It refuses to let suffering become the measure of what it means to be human. And if hope keeps something alive, essential within us, then hope is not simply a gift we receive. It is also a responsibility we bear. What then does hope ask of us? For me, the answer begins with one of the most radical propositions in Torah, a passage I first encountered through the theological inheritance of the Black church. The commandment to love our neighbor is well known. The one that follows it in the same chapter is lesser. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love them as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. What has always captivated me is the logic of that commandment. The memory of our own suffering is not offered as warrant for an exceptional concern with ourselves. It is offered as the very ground of our obligation to someone else. Our wounds were never meant to become walls. They were meant to become bridges. Hope widens the circle. It refuses to let our compassion end where our identities begin. Perhaps that is why throughout this journey, I have found myself attending to another history, one that runs quietly alongside the history of human cruelty. It is the history of those who widened the circle when every force around them demanded that they narrow it. It is the history of those who concealed strangers from danger, preserved forbidden memory, and crossed the boundaries of race and religion, of nation and tribe, because they refused to believe that another person's suffering lay outside of the circle of their concern. It is the history of those who chose responsibility over indifference and solidarity over fear. That history lives in those who fought and resisted enslavement and in colonization, in those who sheltered Jews during the Shoah, and in the communities I have met across Paris, Amsterdam, and London, who continue to insist that memory is not only the preservation of the past, but the shaping of the future. It is also a history that demands something of us now. 3 weeks ago, an 18-year-old young black boy named Nolan Xavier Wells disappeared along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Multiple autopsies have since been conducted since his body was recovered, yet his family still has not been told how their son died. Consider what it means to grieve a child while still waiting to learn what happened to him. To confront not only an unbearable loss, but also the haunting possibility that the delay itself reflects the unequal value our society assigns to certain lives. Last Thursday on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, a 50-year-old man named Moshe was stabbed in the chest as he stepped outside of his synagogue, one of 2 men wounded in that area within minutes of one another. He had spent the evening observing Tisha B'Av, a day devoted to remembering ancient tragedies, and was attacked on his walk home, still wearing his kippah. Neither of these stories reaches me as a distant headline. In one, I recognize myself as an African American. In the other, I recognize myself as a Jew. But it should not take being both. I have come to believe that one of the great failures of our age is not a lack of information about suffering, we are inundated with it, but that we have grown practice at deciding whose wounds we will carry and whose we will leave unattended. We have organized our moral lives around ever smaller circles of concern until we scarcely notice that we are drawing them at all. I belong to 2 traditions whose stories are profoundly different and which I love beyond measure: the African tradition into which I was born and the Jewish tradition into which I have become. I would never collapse them into one another, but I do believe that our destinies are intertwined. Both know what it is to carry memory across generations. Both know what it is to endure persecution without surrendering joy or learning or family or faith or hope. And both have given the world a moral vision that insists our own suffering can never become the boundary of our compassion. I began this journey believing that hope was something we were called to keep alive. I now believe that hope is also what makes solidarity possible across grief, across distance, across history itself. The question is whether we will answer its call. Thank you.
Follow that. Ashley, let's just start with the personal and the family. You grew up in one of America's best-known civil rights families, not just known in the States, but around the world. I want to ask you, what did that teach you? Not about the politics, but about people, because everything that you said there, what I heard running through it alongside the message of hope, was about people. So what did you learn about people growing up in that family?
I think I learned, to bet on people. And I even, I had a wonderful moment this earlier today. I went to the Holocaust Survivor Center here, and I was asked about, the response to my op-ed and the things and what I was fearful of. And frankly, I was really, really, really scared to release that piece, I have to admit. Quite terrified, both at potential blowbacks, potential concerns for safety. And so we had all these measures in place just to ensure that everything was okay. And I would say about 80% of the response has been nothing but positive. And it reminded me to bet on people, because in a world that we presume as really, really dark, there are still so many with light. And I think that has been the central message of my parents to myself, and even to my siblings, that human beings are capable of doing divine, extraordinary things if we give them the chance to.
So, I agree completely with that, but do you find that's a harder message at the moment, where often, certainly in the last few years, days feel quite dark, and having people be open to, as you say, to betting on people? Have you found that to be harder, or you find where you go, people are willing to take that leap of faith?
Even myself last week, I was scared to bet on people. So I think that it's a growing practice. I've found in the work that I really aim to do in the world, it's not about trying to get people to be better. It's about giving them the tools and expanding their capacity to achieve better. Because I do think that we're inherently most humans are inherently good. And so we are looking at a landscape right now that is filled with extremism and toxicity. There's a rise of political violence and acceptance of political violence, and the landscape looks very bleak. I'm very clear on that. I stress about it all the time. But I look at the young people that we're aiming to work with, and I see the potential in them to be strong, capable, emerging leaders, but I don't see the tools for them to do that. And so I think that if we give them the tools, they're going to surprise us. I really do. And so that's, I think, a little bit of hope, but also I do think a practical look at, if we look at just the trajectory of history, the cyclical nature, all these social movements that people have born to ensure that we would have rights today, betting on people.
And you clearly are taking your father's legacy and carrying it forward, but in your own way. You are more than just, the sum of, we're all more than just the sum of our parents, but we are also that. What part of your late father's legacy do you think feels most relevant now, most important to carry forward?
I think both the hope, but on a practical level, the coalition building. When I look at the global coalition he was able to foster, and frankly, the loss, both personally but professionally, with the moral void that he leaves behind, the coalition is fracturing, but in order for us to attack these isms that threaten us, we have to be and I believe global coalition, and what my father believed to be global coalition. He was known here and respected here. He was known on all the continents, I believe, and respected because he went to go bear witness and engage with the people. And so it is my dream that in the same way that he did, that we can look up one day and youth in Los Angeles will be connected to youth in Paris, will be connected to youth in Tel Aviv, will be connected to youth around the globe, so that if one needs to call in a friend, they know who to call. I think right now, while we do have a lot of access on our devices, we are seeing an increase in isolation, and I want to work to prevent that.
A lot of people often say at the moment that in an era where we can be so easily connected, people have never been so disconnected. And I see it, I know there's other people here that are parents of teenagers, and this is a conversation that comes up a lot. They feel like they're connected to their friends because they've seen what they're up to on a Snapchat or a reel they've posted or a TikTok, but did they pick up the phone and have a conversation with them? Did they meet up and have a conversation?
Precisely.
Do you find in your conversations that technology can get in the way, or are you able to yet use it to enhance what you're doing?
Absolutely. I think it can actually serve both purposes. It can enhance the work. It can introduce new perspectives and ideas. It also can be hijacked. There can also be geopolitical factors and warfare at play on our devices that, if we're not privy to, can prove very harmful. And also, I think we're seeing a generation, at least with my peers in Gen Alpha, who have been in the house for years, who spent years traumatized by a pandemic, not learning the social skills to be able to go be the civic leaders that they have been called to be in this world. And so I think that we don't resolve that by keeping them on the devices. Right. I think we resolve that by getting them in person and looking each other's eyes. The serotonin in our brains by being in person is you can't make that by sitting at home on your device. So yeah.
And a lot of the people in this room this evening are people that are engaged in incredible work across the Jewish community and wider that involves building community, bringing people together in real life. So, these are the people that are doing the amazing work. One of the things you spoke about in your incredible opening words there was about living at the intersection of several identities. Actually, I guess in a way that's different in some respects to your father and your family that came before you. How has that, living at the intersection of different identities, how's that shaped the way that you see conflict and deal with community?
Well, I think I would say, being a Black woman in America, I feel like I've already lived at an intersection my entire life that I've been wrestling with, and there's all types of isms you can add to that. Adding a Jewish component to that means that I'm navigating a lot of different spaces. And for my friends who are Black, Jewish, female, and queer, it gets even more complicated. And I think for me, the conflict lives in my body. And that's really, really hard. I mean, just thinking about the stories I mentioned, trying to hold that level of pain in your system, that deep level of care and anguish, the mourning that you feel when a cousin has been harmed, to feel that in your body every single day and sometimes be asked to pull and choose who you mourn for more, is a deeply painful and kind of daily struggle I have to navigate. So I think the conflict lives within, but I also see real hope and possibility because I know that people like myself can be bridge builders. I can translate the language of my African American friends and those who engage in the Black church, and I can also tell everybody who I know who goes to shul with me every week and speak their language. And so I'm kind of able to do a dance that I see to be very helpful because it opens the dialogue a bit further when somebody can help mediate who actually deeply cares and engages in all sides of a particular conflict.
Well, you wrote really movingly about aspects of that in that Washington Post op-ed about taking your father, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing, taking him to synagogue in Los Angeles. By the way, I particularly liked that you gave him the most Jewish moment anyone can have, which is eating the sweets that get thrown at the end of the bar mitzvah. There's this great description of that, and I just had this incredible, people here, I guess, like me, have an image of the late Reverend Jesse Jackson. My image wasn't picking up the kosher sweets from the floor that have been thrown to eat them. But yeah, you've been able to cross that bridge. But are you literally asked by people, take a side? Like, you've got to take a side on the Jews or a side on the Black community and are kind of pushing you to, I guess it's a bit like the loyalty test. Who are you more loyal to? Do you get that literally?
Yes, but before that, I do have to share a quick anecdote about the sun-kissed candies. I think it's kind of funny. So obviously, my father was at shul with me that day, and I remember when early on I tried one of them, and I hate to say I didn't particularly love the taste of it. And so I was like, you know what? These are good to throw, but not good to eat. I know my boundaries. And I remember my dad, he loved sweets, and he saw one, and I couldn't figure out what he was kind of pointing to because his illness had also progressed. And so he pointed, and I realized he wanted a sun-kissed candy. And over the course of the service, 7 candies later, I was like, okay, Dad, like we have to take a rest. But it was this kind of fun moment where I was like, he's so deeply engaged in this like spiritual culture and this spiritual work that he's just like loving the candies.
You should have told him if he has 10, he's converted. That's kind of how it works. I like to play tricks on people in
There
shul.
you go. But to answer your question, yes, I get that loyalty test question all the time. I mean, that was also one of my fears in navigating, even writing the op-ed, is how does one defend their love for multiple peoples, which like seems like kind of a basic concept that of course you can love and care for and even align, whether it be politically or socially, with multiple groups at a time. But I think in the case of, Black Jews and other groups straddling these particular types of fences, it's often a constant, like, well, how do I know that you care about me more? And for me, my real answer is I care about humanity the most. And so I love my Black people, I love my Jewish people, and I love humanity, and I'm always going to fight for a world that is more just and equal for all peoples as much as I tend to my own tribe.
Amen. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your relationship with the Jewish community. I don't mean now. As everybody here knows, you've joined us. Some people would say, why would anyone want to right now join us? So it's a brave decision. But I'm more curious, going back, when and how did the relationship with Jewish community start? And how did you kind of find a path that took you to where you are now, which is Miriam, with your beautiful Jewish name? Just tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, well, I think I've always been in a relationship with the Jewish community. For one, I always went to school with Jewish children, so there was and the beauty of children oftentimes is before they are exposed to troublesome ideas in our world, we're friends with everybody. And so I always had connectivity to Jewish students growing up in school. I attended bar and bat mitzvahs. I felt like I was just a part of their world as they were a part of mine. I never, which was kind of funny, I never actually attended a service, though, until I was an adult on this particular path. I don't know why we just chose to go to the parties as kids, but that was what we wanted to do.
That doesn't happen here at all.
So I did have this sense of still learning and things that I did not know about Jewish culture and identity and faith tradition. And so that was still a nice learning experience to have as an adult. But I also think as well, my parents have always kind of, what I spoke about, the boundary of our moral concern is always extended to all peoples. And I grew up with a keen understanding of Jewish history and Jewish history also of persecution and always threading the needle, my parents teaching me the ways in which my understanding of my history could correlate to someone else's understanding of their Jewish history. So I always felt with a respectful kind of distance in that I was not a Jew, that I had a kinship with this particular group. And we learned about the civil rights movement and the NAACP. And so there was this understanding of a bridge built between these two peoples that was quite special. And then it wasn't until, I guess, around late 2022, I was kind of on my own spiritual journey. As I mentioned in the article, I was going through some health challenges and other components in my life, and I wouldn't call it a spiritual crisis, but I really was just questioning, and I was looking for answers, but not in a real sense. What I love about Judaism particularly is that you can question forever and never get an answer, and that's kind of the point. And so for me, I was just loving this journey of questioning that I was on, and I, funny enough, came across a YouTube video. I had been watching, this is so silly, I had been watching The Big Bang Theory during the pandemic, and I started looking up the cast because I work in entertainment, that's what I do, and I fell in love with Mayim Bialik's YouTube channel. And she was speaking about just being a Jew, just her family, her life, the way that she celebrates holidays, just honestly, not even as religious as much as it was just her cultural experience as a Jew in the world, and something about it just made me go, whoa, this feels deeply resonant. And so I went through like a year of kind of studying on my own, and I realized that I should take a chance on a shul at some point if I was going to see if this was really for me or not, or just keep studying for the rest of my days. And so I went to my shul the first Shabbat 2024 and fell in love, and I have never left, and I'm there a lot. So I really enjoy it.
I think there'll be some people here that know some of your rabbis. So just mention the names of a couple of your rabbis who you're close to, because you'll get, I think there'll be some smiles on some people's faces.
Oh, for sure. My rabbi, Sharon Brous, for instance, my queen, I love her. There's also Rabbi Deborah Silver, who I know some of you know.
See, I knew we'd get a nice big smile from the people that grew up with her and knew her before she went to LA and, you know, became a Hollywood rabbi.
I'm going to tell her you said that. There's Rabbi Morris Panis, Rabbi Hannah Jensen, but there's also so many other rabbis in the community. It's kind of one of those rabbi shuls where like everyone who's not doing their own sermons comes there. So I've gotten to know a lot of great rabbis in the city.
I want you to know there are not many stages in London where name-dropping rabbis get such a great reaction, but at JW3, it's great. So you go through this journey. Actually, I want to ask you if it's okay, about reactions as you were going through this journey, from friends and family, if you're comfortable speaking about that, the positive and if at all the negative. Were people just curious, entirely supportive, or like, what on earth are you doing? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in the same way that I think I had this kind of doomsday fear of what would happen when the op-ed dropped, I think I had that fear every time I got ready to tell somebody I was converting or even thinking about converting. And I don't really remember a time in which someone was just downright mean. So I think there are very real fears in the world, and I don't know that those fears of mine manifested in the way that I had thought that they would. But I also still really did not tell a lot of people. I kept it very close to my chest. It was very important to me to let my conversion process be my process and to not let it be interrupted, whether with really, really, really great support or really, really, really poor support or lack thereof. And so I kind of just took it upon myself to go on the journey. Obviously, my parents knew, my siblings. Like I made sure that those who needed to know knew, but everyone else I kind of just let it come out as it emerged. And then there were still people I was frankly calling right before the op-ed dropped saying, oh, I'm a Jew now, sorry, I forgot to tell you. So surprise, I'm a Jew. So I've been navigating that, but still, I've yet to receive, at least in my interpersonal space, anybody treating me with anything but kindness and love. And frankly, even those who I did not tell understood why I needed to take my time and that this was a very gentle process. And I'm even still adapting to people knowing in the real world now because it has been so internal for so long. But I'm so grateful to have such a great community at home who has really nurtured me and been there for me and ensured that I had privacy and safety when I wanted it and supported me when I was ready to fly free.
And then the Wash Post piece came out on Friday. We were actually having a conversation. You were in Paris when we were speaking?
I think Paris,
I remember you were in
that
Paris.
sounds right.
And we had a sort of a prep Zoom call before, and I could see just that kind of nervous anticipation. It was a couple of hours before. It's what we say on spilkers in Yiddish. I hope you got taught that. It's an important word. Just on that kind of edge of. It's an important part of any conversion process to learn the key words. By the way, I'll be running my own course later in the term if you'd like to sign up. But I just thought there was a bit of that understandable. In fact, I felt it. And Fran, who you met, who's our wonderful EA here, she was like refreshing and waiting for it to come out to see. And then it came out, and as you said, there wasn't thunder and lightning, and the earth didn't fall in, and you're still here with us today.
Yes.
Are you a don't read the comments kind of a person, or do you find yourself scrolling and figure? Adriana's probably going to say whatever she says.
I'm making eye contact with Adriana, who is our strategic partnerships advisor for the Hope Missions, because we had a whole plan in place. I was not going to have my phone. I was not going to look at comments. Adriana was going to give me a daily update. All of a sudden, I had my phone, I was looking through the comments, and Adriana was looking at me like I had lost my mind. She was right, I was wrong, but that's what nervous energy does sometimes. So yeah, I definitely was a refresher. At some point, I did stop reading the comments. Also, Shabbat interrupting that really helped for me because I don't use my phone on Shabbat. So then it was like, okay, now you can actually live in the world and stop being stressed out about this. But even then, I mean, again, 80% really positive, 20% really awful. And that was better than the odds I had predicted the day before, so it was kind of still a win for me.
To be honest, I would take 80% positive on anything I say publicly. So I think that's great. So we're just going to move into kind of this this hope mission of yours, because I think it's really interesting to learn a bit more about it, and then we're going to open the conversation out more widely. So if you haven't already been thinking about things you would like to maybe bring up, think that at the same time. So I'm really curious, and I didn't ask you this when you first contacted me. I was just too excited to have the conversation with you, but I didn't ask you why you chose specifically to come to Europe, why particularly of all of Europe you wanted to include the UK as part of that. You can say something flattering to us now, we like that. What kind of questions brought you here with this Hope mission?
Certainly. I, for one, and this is just like an additional context, the trip was supposed to continue another week, but I have to go home for some work things. So we're pushing, Berlin and Poland to next year, which is, it would have ended there. And that would have been my initial European leg, but now we're splitting it into two, which is kind of fun. And I'll probably jump back over since everything's kind of close. But let me see. So the reasons I was looking at, first, the latter half of the trip was much more sites of memory and ways to learn from institutions who are protecting those sites and what that process has been as I look to honor my father's legacy, both in the States and abroad. But these first three cities, which have been remarkable thus far, have really both been spaces where my dad did a lot of work. And so I wanted to really excavate that international legacy and be able to showcase it to my peers, and also for myself, just as a curious person. But I think that all three cities both have these really interesting ties to the past and the present, both in the best and the worst of ways. And so I wanted to learn the history on the ground. It's one thing to read about it and to consume it on the internet. It's another thing to bear witness in person. And I knew that there would be space for that, but I also knew that the organizations and leaders I had been hearing about who lived in these particular spaces were so dynamic that I was like, why would I not go and meet in person? Now I can see how tall Raymond is, for instance. These are new things that you learn when you're in person with somebody. And so I was really really, as we looked at all of the different spaces, these three felt like really great starting points, and more so, there's so many more to come that this is, the beauty of it now is that these are relationships that we continue to build, and I will continue to come back for longer periods of time and engage. But those were my first three for those particular reasons.
And I know I'm not going to ask you to obviously share anything from private conversations you've had, but I'm curious if there was anything on your visit so far that surprised you.
Yeah, I think in some ways, like hidden history. Like yesterday, we were doing a tour of Black heritage in Amsterdam, and to see the ways that Dutch colonial history just lives out in the open and it's not addressed was just deeply surprising, because I think even in the States, we reckon with our history, oddly enough, just a tad bit more, and I still don't think as much as enough as it should. So it was really amazing to see, like, this is built into the infrastructure of this place, and yet where is the reckoning? Where is the truth and reconciliation here? And so that was one thing that really surprised me. Obviously, reading about Anne Frank as a young girl and then going to that space, I've done, as I said, a lot of crying on this trip. I cried when we were at the Foundation for the Remembrance of Slavery in Paris, but also I think the financial repercussions of these trades of humans has been really interesting to see in real time, and to see the ways in which we were seen as commodities, and also to see how quickly it can happen again, and in spaces where it's still happening. The last thing I'll say is I remember when we were walking through the Foundation for the Remembrance of Slavery, we were entering a salon, and it was to kind of showcase that this type of gathering would be amongst those who were quite wealthy, and their tapestry was of people of color, Africans, who were engaging in slave labor. And that was just the tapestry on the back of the wall. So they're reaping the rewards, and in real time, they're kind of confronted with this history. And we were horrified. How dare they? That's so horrible. How can you sit and know what's happening and not do anything about it? And then our lovely guide said, just like we're all doing with our phones. And I stopped, and I thought about the children in the Democratic Republic of Congo whose hands are being sliced off right now while I scroll on my iPhone, and how easy it is for us to remove ourselves from this type of tragedy that is literally still happening today. And so that's been some of the reckoning that we've been doing. And how do you address these issues? How do you engage young people in these issues? I'm deeply, deeply curious. So a lot of listening, but also a lot of thinking hard about what I can take back to the States with this information.
I mean, it sounds like a fascinating trip, and I'm going to just finish off, and then we're going to open up, which is, you call this the Hope Mission, and you described some of your experiences there, which are so moving and could make people lose hope or find it hard to gather hope. I think in a world that feels, like I said at the beginning, increasingly divided, it certainly does from my viewpoint, more divided, more febrile. What is it that genuinely gives you hope? You say about keeping hope alive. What helps you keep hope alive?
I really think the next generation, as corny as it sounds, because that's part of my organization name, I really do think that when I talk to teenagers and 10-year-olds and even 5-year-olds about what they want to be when they grow up, these are kids who are still dreaming of a future. These are kids like Anne who are saying, no, maybe it can get better, and maybe I can be a part of that change. And so I think that level of resiliency is something that I'm really attracted to, and I think brings me a lot of hope. I also think learning from history the ways that both atrocities can happen, but people also can do the right thing. And to see that time and time again as a cycle as well gives me hope, because it means that we all have the capacity right now to do the right thing, and that there's always a choice given to us, and so we should make the right one.
I love that. Hope has been one of the themes that I think that I've spoken about the most since October 7th, to the point where often I see my colleagues, as I start to talk about hope again, almost rolling their eyes because they know what I'm going to say. And I think I said to you in our first call, I shared with you a teaching from the late former Chief Rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha, who spoke and talked about the difference between hope and optimism. Is that familiar with, some of you familiar with that? He talked about how, and I'm going to paraphrase now, but talked about how, optimism is a very passive thing. It is he wrote that it's the belief that the world will get better. Whereas hope is active. Hope is the belief that you and I can make the world better. And again, it might sound, when I word it like that, slightly naive, slightly cheesy. But he really, taught that hope is something you do. And if we do it together, we can be hopeful. And I think your work is a really strong reminder of that. And to take the time, especially this same period as this huge news is coming out in the public about you, to not be right in the middle of your own home, family and community, but to come over to Europe, to visit our communities, to bring a message of hope, I think is just really timely and important. So I want to just thank you for that before we go any further. Yeah, please. So here's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to try and do something just slightly different and see if you'll go with me. This is the point normally where, if you've seen me with a microphone before, I would say something like, we're going to go to questions. Remember, a question is not a long statement with an upward inflection and all of that kind of stuff. But that's not what we're going to do. I want us to continue a conversation. So rather than just making it a Q&A, and I acknowledge I might fail when we go into Q&A, it'll be fascinating anyway. But we're going to try and see if we can get a conversation going, because Ashley wants to hear from us as well. I want people to share reflections, thoughts, questions, yes, as well. It could be challenges to something, respectful challenges to something Ashley said. Maybe something Ashley said resonated with you in your work in the community or out of the community or your personal life. Maybe something she said challenged with you and you just want to say that to her and let her know that. This room contains rabbis and educators and charity trustees and community leaders and CEOs and activists and all sorts of wonderful people that come here. You have got a rich, diverse range of experiences here, and we want you to share that, because I want Ashley to leave having heard something authentic about British Jewish communities' experience. So let's try. I also do something slightly different first. If we've got two wonderful ushers, they're over here, just give us a wave. Just introduce yourself, so you're part of the community and conversation. Just introduce yourself to everyone.
I'm Natalia.
Natalia?
Hi, I'm Fiona.
Okay, I know I put you on the spot there, so you don't have to thank me later. So I'm going to ask people when they speak to just wait to get a microphone. So just, put your hand up and wave. Try not to be too long in what you're saying. We don't want a whole Megillah. And then maybe, depending on what you've said, we might jump to someone else before we go to Ashley. If there's someone who says, I want to respond to that, just kind of wave at me, and we'll try and get that conversation going. So let's get the first couple of hands up. And if I can't quite see your face, and I should know your name, it's just because the light is in my eyes. So there's one hand over here, and then we're going to go to Rabbi Deborah over here to start with. So kick us off. If someone does want to respond to that before you, Rabbi Deborah, we're going to try that. So go for it. Introduce yourself as well.
My name is Michael Conn. I'd like to ask you, Ashley, what does hope look like? What do you think we can actually deliver for the next generation?
Respond?
Go for it.
Okay, great. Sounds like we're all trying it out together. I think, so one of the exciting programs that we're launching next year is called Patchwork Over Dinner. And it is born of my father's DNC speech, in which he speaks about, each patch and names that patch and gives honor to that patch as being its own unique individual space, worthy of existing in its own, but that you can't build a quilt unless you sew the patches together. And so one of the things that we're looking to do as an organization is start to build out a curriculum in which we teach young people over the course of several conversations how to stay at the table, how to get to the difficult topics while building allies. And so one of the things that gives me hope is that I know for many around the world, there have been conversation models that have actually really worked. And so we're really excited to dig into our own. We're starting with a group of Black and Jewish teens in Los Angeles, and we'll build out out from there. And the goal is to make it an international curriculum that Indian and Pakistani kids can come together and work through their challenges, that Israeli and Palestinian kids can come together, and that we'll partner with other organizations who are already doing that work as well, so that we're not just kind of floundering around and stepping on organizations. But that gives me hope, because I think that when young people are given the tools, they can actually do the work that we're calling them to do, that we need them to do right now. And so I'm excited that I think we're going to be giving them some tools in our space, but that other organizations are already doing that as well.
Thank you. Before we come to you, did anyone want to add something to that? A thought, a reflection, or I'm going to go to Ilana at the back. We are going to come to you, I promise. So Ilana at the back, if you could get the microphone over to there at the back on this side. Just give a wave, Ilana, so they can see you.
Hi. So I've been doing some work recently with a philanthropist who's really interested in how do we address anti-Semitism, because obviously that's a big issue that's going on, that's kind of a sleeping giant that's it's woken up quite a lot recently. And one of the most sort of proven routes is contact theory, as you're discussing, right? That you meet people and you have a conversation. But with the Jewish community in the UK being 0.5% of the UK population and also being concentrated in particular areas, that makes the contact theory piece really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. So how do you what are the alternatives to, to like setting up a Jew zoo where everyone can kind of come and meet a Jew? How do you...
We're in it now, was the comment from here.
What's your thoughts on, if you can't, where contact theory isn't possible, what do you do?
Well, first, I want to really affirm what you said when I think a lot about this notion that, propaganda can't thrive if you know your neighbors. So there is really a necessity for us, especially when we're navigating fights against anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism, to become proximal again. But I think there's also, I'm not one to say that the digital age is completely disruptive and that we can't use these tools if need be. So I think that there's also, as I imagine, even in some of these spaces where we want children from different countries to interact, we're going to have to put them together on Zoom until we have enough funding to connect every child in the world. So I do think, to your point, that there are digital components that can be looked at. And also, I think kids are really, really creative. So I think that there's other things that we can explore. And some of what we're doing with our pilot program is asking the children what they need and what they want, because I think that it's one thing to just say, oh, they can do it, but they also have agency and power. And so I think that there is some kind of push and pull there where we can share what we know as people who are a little bit older than them, but also that we can learn from the youth where they think that if they could use the tool in this capacity online to communicate with somebody, what that would look like. So we're definitely still exploring. I definitely have not figured out how to combat every ism at all, but I really hope that some of this stuff can chip away at the edges and we will inspire other young people and other people to want to figure out what the new method is that will work best for them.
And we talk a lot here at JW3 about, we're coming up for 13 years for our bar mitzvah. There will be sweets thrown, don't worry. We talk a lot about trying to create and nurture a culture of encounter, to try and create spaces and events that purposely bring different people together without a forced agenda beyond being together and encountering each other and doing things together. But exactly as Ilana says, 90 whatever % of the non-Jewish population in this country have never met a Jew, and their impression of what a Jew is like is from media, social media, traditional media, fiction, etc. So it is a challenge, and embracing how we connect people digitally as well, although it's second best for me, but...
Yeah, second best for me as well, but I think that, even we've been talking a lot about, everyone wants to know, well, how do you bring young people to the table? And I have some theories, but I don't have all the answers, and I think that there's a lot of conversations now that are really important about incentivization, because I think that there are, when I look at, for instance, in the U.S., right, I wouldn't consider us a big soccer or football kind of country, but the World Cup took our country by storm. And what I saw more than people exploring the sport and engaging in the work was people desperate to connect with one another by any means necessary. People they had never met before. They were curious, they were engaged, they were open and excited to share where they came from with one another. And I think that if we create more spaces and environments for people to have encounter that's not even forced, like our program, while it's not forced, will be kind of structured in a particular way as we grow. But there are ways all around the world that we can be finding ways to produce encounter. And so I really hope that we can kind of even brainstorm about some more ways that we can do that together. And that's one of the things I've been talking to a lot of organizations about since I've been here.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your patience. We're going to go to you, and then we'll put your hands down now and stick them up in a moment.
Hey, Rabbi Deborah Kahn-Harris. Actually, Rabbi Professor Deborah Kahn-Harris.
Mazel tov.
So since Ray, you said we don't have to just ask a question, there is a question at the end of this, but a kind of reflection. About 8 years ago, I was really privileged to be on a all-female tour taken by the charity Remembering Srebrenica to Bosnia. And we went to Srebrenica, which is the site of a massive genocide in Europe in the 20th century that I remember being on the news. And I've been to Auschwitz, and I've been to other of the camps, and I've been to the Ile de Gorée as well, and lots of places. But being in a site where things happened in my living memory, and where we could talk to people, not just people who lived through the experiences, but where we were taken to a mortuary where they were still trying to identify the bones of dead people, was a different kind of encounter. So, and that we did it as a group of women, and that we spent our time talking to female survivors who had mostly been the victims of gender-based violence. So often when we talk about these sort of violences and traumas to people, we think about death, we think about that kind of brutality. And so actually the question I wanted to ask you was how you experience the world as a woman. You've spoken a lot about your dad. I grew up in the American South, so your dad is an icon, and I get how important he was, but I wish you'd talk about your mum too, and tell us how she's influenced you.
Definitely. Well, she's definitely much more private, so I try to respect that boundary with her. But I know that she also, which is also, if you'll notice, I'm trying to be very intentional with my words. I mentioned my parents a lot when I referenced the op-ed. Obviously, people wanted to learn about my father's experience there, but I'm the sum of two people. So definitely want to give homage to my mama. What an extraordinary woman she is, and I think a lot about the ways that I was conditioned in the world as a result of her understanding both the joys and the real traumas that are experienced by women in the world. I think that she, in the same way that I kind of look at our global human family, really taught me to look at women around the world in the same way. And so I grew up understanding keenly both the access and privilege I had as a woman, and also the lack thereof as a Black woman, and then also the privilege I had being an American woman versus those who are experiencing mutilation in other spaces in the world. And so I felt like always this deep sense of connection to my womanhood. And I even talked about it a little bit in my spiritual autobiography, which was a part of my process of conversion, this sense of Judaism and Blackness meeting me in my womanhood, that I don't actually have to give up anything, any part of myself to stake claim in this new space. But it's really challenging because the world that we look at today, has been deeply rooted in patriarchy for a very, very long time. That's a no-brainer. But I constantly wrestle with when, how, and where to assert womanhood in the conversation. And so this honestly is also giving me a lot of food for thought, because I do a lot of work with women and girls in the States. I do a lot of anti-human trafficking and sex trafficking work. So I'm constantly confronted with the ways that women and girls are victimized, and want to also find other ways to celebrate us in our prime and successes. So I think I would love to have that be an ongoing conversation of the ways that I can even assert that more in the work that I'm doing, because girls and women are very important and central, and non-binary people, to the work that I want to do as well.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to Richard and then Noah. And then I'm going to come back to Gloria and Rabbi Leah, I think is it? Yeah. So that's four, which we'll see how we do for time there. But again, if someone says something and you want to respond to something someone said, give us a wave and we'll get you the mic briefly as well. Introduce yourself and then go for it.
My name is Richard Myron. Ashley, I found everything you had to say profoundly moving, and thank you very much for sharing it with us. But I want to challenge you in certain respects. I lived in the States for several years, and the period of time when Barack Obama was president and into Donald Trump's first term, and remember seeing, the MLK statue, the arc of history bends towards justice, and I have a vision in my mind of your father, I think, standing with this tear-streamed face behind Barack Obama when he gave his speech in Chicago. You talk of hope, and hope is something that we try and cling on to, but these are very difficult times, and we see how things have gone backwards in the United States in terms of racism, overt racism from the highest offices in the land. Also, depressingly, we also see fracturing between communities which have found a natural alliance, like the Jewish community and parts of the African American community. I'm not trying to burst your balloon. I think everything that you're doing is wonderful, but is there also anger underneath? And I'm not really posing a direct question. It's more of an observation. To someone who stands at the crossroads, between these two peoples and this extraordinary and challenging time that we live in.
Well, one, I thank you for that challenge, and it's definitely something I think, as I mentioned, I wrestle with literally in my body on a daily basis, is how to navigate these fractures and tensions in the state of the world, and feeling like you're a target because you're a woman, feeling like you're a target because you're black, feeling like you're a target because you're a Jew, and then feeling like you're a target because you're all of it. And how to sit with that has been really, really challenging in this time. I think for me as a student of history, like, as much as there are many things that are new in this particular paradigm, so much has been the cycle of our country's history, the progress and the immediate and backlash and vitriol and response that doesn't feel new to me. And I think so because of that, I feel a particular kind of fortification internally to some of what's happening right now, is that I know when Barack Obama was elected, that we have been literally living with the cost of that as a nation as a result of our lack of our previous reckoning now for many, many, many years. I know when I saw people walking down the street with tiki torches, what that was a symbol of. I saw that, what was that, 2 months ago? There was other people walking down the Capitol in masks like this. As much as it is awful, it's not new. And I think for myself, when I really start to think about my ancestors, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about them recently, I recently, for the first time, read an ancestor mentioning that she was enslaved. Like I actually read her talking about her time of enslavement and knowing that she was my direct matriarchal connection. And I know that it was so much worse for them. And so I know that things are really, really awful right now. They are, but I don't feel that I have, at least at this point in time, the luxury, and it's kind of the wrong word, but I don't have the right one off the tip of my tongue, the luxury to stand by and wallow in it. I know that if it was them, they'd be doing far beyond. My father literally in his ICU bed was still fighting for SNAP benefits and calling people and saying, you have to do something. So how can I just say, well, this pains me today. I have to get up every day. And if I don't have the hope, I think I'd be under the stage, frankly, because it is so painful. But I feel a responsibility to those that came before me and for the 7 generations to come after me. So I kind of just get up and do the work and wrestle with it in my spare time at home.
Sorry, I can tell when it's a phenomenal conversation because I forget that I'm supposed to be doing a job up here and moving us on, and I just want to listen. So we're going to go to Gloria and then Rabbi Leah, and then we'll see if we've got time. We'll go to, sorry, Noah. We didn't get to you yet. It's Noah and then across. And then we'll see if we've got time to go to the back, Toby.
So yes, Noah. And I'm glad that Raymond said that we didn't necessarily have to have questions, because I'm not actually quite sure how I can follow such deep, thoughtful conversation so far, and to really thank you for sharing with us of such varied insights. But something that really struck me from what you said was about your intersectional identity. Something that I certainly noticed existing as a queer Jew in this country, the differences in how I present myself and how I think of my own safety compared to non-queer Jews. I think of before and after the 7th of October, whereas I've always known that stepping out of my front door is a political statement, but then seeing other Jews around me start to realize that after the 7th of October was something that was really quite striking. And that sort of brings me to part of the work that I will be very soon doing with students, bringing together Jewish and Muslim students to forge bridges in between two different communities that have really fractured apart. Can something fracture apart when the relationships weren't necessarily there? That's another conversation to be had. But I'd be really curious to hear a bit more about this really impassioned work with the young people and that space between those two communities.
Well, for one, we're just getting started, so I would love to chat with you more about some of that stuff. And a lot of, I mean, even some of the meetings we've had with young people on these trips, the goal is that hopefully the next time I come back, we can get those in that community and those in that community to sit with me together. I didn't want to just spring that upon people because I know that these times are really, really challenging. And again, to the point of me wanting to take several dinners to introduce people, I don't want to just kind of throw everybody in. But I do, I sit a lot with this intersectional identity, and I think sometimes it's easier almost to stake claim in one identity over the other because sometimes it hurts. And I think sometimes when you're a Black woman in a space where you, in a, let's say a Jewish environment where you don't feel fully seen in your Black womanhood, that's really painful. When you're in a Black space and sometimes you don't feel fully seen in your Jewishness, that's equally painful. And so I feel like I'm constantly kind of teeter-tottering, and I guess to the question of dealing with the challenge and turning it into a force of kind of hope is that I think what I find now is that the people who are navigating these multiple intersections are maybe really meant for this season, are maybe really meant to be the bridge builders. And so like to take all of the anguish that comes sometimes with navigating this, how much of myself do I want to give today? And frankly, also in many spaces now, I'm just myself. I don't really try to navigate anymore. But to take that and look to a world in which you are the bridge builder between these communities. When you, like, not that we need to put our bodies on the line, but that we do have an agency and responsibility in this time to really serve as a force for good. I think that a lot of challenges in this time can't really be kind of flipped in that way. But I think that these ones can, that I can tell Jewish people if I've been hurt, and I can tell Black people if I've been hurt, and that they might hear me because I represent all of them within me. And so how beautiful is that, instead of looking at it as the inverse.
Thank you. For the next two people, because I want to try if we can get one or two more people in. If you're able to be concise, great. If you're not, then we won't go wide and we'll just go into your questions.
I won't give you the lecture that I was going to give you. I wanted to just take part in the conversation. I just wanted to pick up on Ilana's point. So this is more about my own experience, and then I want to ask you a question, Ashley. From my own experience, I worked at the BBC for 30 years, but I travelled around the country, and I was surprised at how in so many places they'd never met a Jew. And it's just made me think, Raymond, about our responsibility here at JW3, and just picking up on Ilana's, I think there's a lot more that we can do now in terms of what is a Jew and who is a Jew and who are we. And there's something that I'm doing with the BBC to actually address that. But my question to you, Ashley, is, first of all, thank you. It's been absolutely amazing and very moving. But what have you had to, in your conversion and in your experience and in your journey in the last 3 or 4 years, is there anything you've had to unlearn?
Interesting.
I like that.
Yeah, I was like, I definitely have some thoughts, but just to your earlier comment, I wanted to name the fact that there were several people that I told that I was converting that had no clue that Black Jews could and do exist. And so that in itself was there's really a lot of and these are people that are in my sphere of influence and connectivity. So imagine those who really, really don't have any connectivity. So I think there's a lot of work to do there, and I'm really interested. And I don't intend by any means to become any sort of Black Jewish symbol. That's not my goal. I'm just existing in the world. But I do think that shining a light upon the diversity and the beauty and the spectrum of Judaism and also of Jewish people and Jewish culture and thought is so vital. Because I think for me, I fell in love with Judaism when I got to really learn and know and engage. Things I had to unlearn. I think I had done some of the unlearning as it pertained to the faith tradition prior to my segue. So that was kind of my own journey and just transitioning from a Christian thought process into a Jewish one was just a different journey to go on. But I didn't actually find it very challenging. Things I unlearned. Honestly, I think, and this may not be the best answer, but I had to unlearn a lot within myself and how I moved through the world. Because I think, oddly enough, I was moving through the world with a lot of apology. I don't want to intrude here. Oh, you just asked me why I'm at this event, but it was a private event listed just for Jews. I was on the invite list. There's only 10 people in here. Why am I here? Because I'm also a Jew. But trying to navigate those spaces and feeling like I had to apologize early on, both in my conversion process and kind of even in the navigating how much I was going to share about my process. I think almost to the point of womanhood, I had to learn that I can stand on my own as a human being in my fullness and that be enough. So I think that was a part of a through line of my own conversion journey, but also just in the process of, I think, growing up in the world. And I'm only 27 now, so I'm sure I have a lot more unlearning and learning to do. But I think just sitting with the challenge of that and acknowledging that also comes from patriarchy, it comes from racism, it comes from sexism, it comes from all the other isms, and choosing to move differently has been my new little journey I'm on.
Good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Please introduce yourself.
Rabbi Leah Mühlstein, thank you so much. And I wanted to pick up on what you spoke about the power of coalition, and that's one thing that you're really taking away from your father, or building on from your father's legacy. I think many of us have experienced in the post-October 7th world that coalition building has become much more challenging. I do a lot of interfaith work, especially with the Muslim community. And while the very grassroots interfaith work of personal encounter, luckily, at least in my work, has survived the October 7th and its aftermath and the destruction of Gaza, and I think a lot of the very high-level interfaith work is still happening, but a lot of the local coalition building is really challenging because my counterparts in local mosques say, I'm really afraid what my people will say if I invite you and they Google you, and all over the internet they'll find that you're a Zionist. I don't think I can, I don't know if you would be safe if I invited you. So I guess my question is, how do we help those who we want to build coalitions with to overcome fear? Fear that I think we're much more familiar with, unfortunately, as the Jewish community. And the Muslim community is familiar with fear in a different way. I think the rise of Islamophobia is also very real. But this fear about I bring someone in who represents something that my people have a very specific vision of, even though I'm pretty sure that their picture of a Zionist doesn't quite look like me. So how do we help people overcome fear?
That's a heavy question, but a really important one in this time. And I'm going to tell you now, I don't think I have all the answers, but I see where fear can be useful, and I see where it can be really harmful and detrimental to us. I see where it can harden our hearts and close us in and isolate us. And so I think that it's really important that we sit with that question, to be honest. So I don't know that I have all the answers, but I do. You made me think about this notion of storytelling and stories. And I think what's really important in this time with respect to people's individual experiences is allowing stories to exist that may be in conflict with our own. And I think it's so easy for us to dismiss a story that sounds, and not those that are harmful particularly, but stories that just sit in the conflict of that. And I know that when we look at fear, for some people, there's a fear that my story won't matter if I listen to your story. And my story is everything I have. My story is my identity. My story is my people, is my history, is my lineage. And so when you bring that to the table and someone tells you it's not real, or someone denies you your right to dignity and to your story, it becomes really hard. And if you experience that enough, you're absolutely saying, I'm out. But I think that's the call of our time, is to listen to someone else's story, to let our story be heard, and to show up anyway. I mean, I show up to other rooms where I'm like, this probably could go really, really poorly. But the cost on the other end is me shutting myself out from the potential for us achieving collective liberation together. And why would I not fight for that? So I don't have all the answers as it pertains to fear, but I think that there are some gems on the other side of it that if we just take one step further, we might be able to see.
Thank you. We are going to have to finish very soon, but Toby, you're going to get sorry, I know there's a few more people and this conversation can go on, but we might be lucky enough, for Ashley to be able to stay on for a short bit. She has got other appointments to get to and we don't want her to be late, but when we finish, I'm going to invite you to kind of go along to the cafe, the bar. If you buy her a drink, you can carry on the conversation, kind of the off-record conversation. But Toby, because you were waiting for quite a while. It will come on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming here to share with us your story and your vision, which is very inspiring. I think my question builds maybe a little bit on Richard's question from earlier. I think we've seen in the post-October 7th period really the growing power and force of certain ideas, particularly coming actually out of American academia and American universities, but also very influential here. I'm thinking about ideas like certain versions of critical race theory, certain versions of intersectionality, certain versions of post-colonialism, which have very, very binary approaches to race and racism, and prejudice and discrimination, and who is oppressed and who is an oppressor. And I think, given your story, you have a particularly valuable perspective on this, because I think we've seen, or it feels like, a trend whereby to be in solidarity with black people in the black community or people of color means by default to be in solidarity with Palestinians, but not only in solidarity with Palestinians, but in solidarity with Palestinians in a way that erases or distorts or is indifferent to the historical experience and identity of Jews. And I just wonder, given your very unique identity now, whether that's something you recognize or have experienced, or how you see that among your different networks and communities, and how you respond to that.
We wanted to finish with something light.
Well, for one, thank you for that question. I mean, I sit with this a lot. Maybe not necessarily in those same terms, but I think the binaries and the silos that we exist in are incredibly harmful. I personally have always, and very early on, detested the use of the pro before we mention a people or an identity, as if to say we shouldn't be pro-humanity and pro-peace building and pro-safety for all people in a region, that we have to choose a side. And I think there's a lot of historical context that will take much more time than we have to get into for why certain groups align with certain other groups, and also why particular ideologies persist. But also, as we know, there's been virulent strains of anti-Semitism rising in particular ways that hijack some of these righteous movements for self-liberation and termination as well. So I absolutely sit with it, I reckon with it, and I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that the binaries are going to, if we don't counteract the binaries with the third way, the third narrative, the third alternative, we're going to look at a world in 50 to 100 years, if it still exists, that is drastically different and worse for all people. Nobody will win in that world. And so I'm trying to fight my hardest to figure out how we can bring people back to the table and give them another alternative, and another way to see and communicate, because words really matter. And I've seen now, sometimes you'll talk to someone and they don't even mean the word that they're using. They use the word, it's harmful to you, but they actually meant something else. And so, like, how do we allow people to open their hearts and allow them to be curious? And I think that that also starts with ourselves. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is like just move with curiosity, move with willingness to engage with one another, and move with a heart that is open enough to hold all of the trauma, all of the pain, but also all of the joy and all the resilience.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for being so open and sharing and giving so much of yourself this evening. This was all about, I said it at the beginning, this was about conversation. So I just want to ask you, as we finish, from things you've heard tonight, from things that have come up, what conversations do you hope that you will continue after tonight? I don't mean just in our cafe afterwards, but over coming months, what are some of these conversations that have come up that will linger with you and that you want to continue having with our community and with other communities?
Well, for one, I think I've mentioned, and hopefully you guys can grasp it, I'm really a curious person, and I'm also not one to tout what I don't know. And so I really want to continue the conversation by way of learning. I want to learn different perspectives. I want to learn what the experience is of the British Jew. I live in America and we have a very different experience, but even as we discuss, which Raymond and I have discussed before, so one of the other reasons I'm really out here too is because we look at this rise of anti-Semitism globally, this rise of anti-Black racism globally, this rise of fascism and authoritarianism, and yet we all try to chip away at it in our own silos. And I think that that's actually a product of divisiveness that doesn't serve any of us. And so I want to figure out, can we be talking about while it's very different in its manifestation, can we talk to the Jews in Paris about what's happening and what they've done and what they haven't done and what we might be able to help them with? So I think some of it too is like, what are the needs of these communities? What are the needs of the British Jewish community? What are the needs of the larger British population, and where we can kind of fill in the gap, support, build this international coalition, build this international network. It's really essential to me that we, and important to me that we do that work together. So I'm just curious, I'm open, and I want to just kind of step in now while I think that we still have a chance to course correct.
And taking a bet on people is what you said earlier, and thank you for taking a bet on us this evening. What we want to do is we really want to continue this conversation with you. So when you do come back to Europe, if you're able in your schedule to fit in an evening in London, we would love to convene something working with some of you to bring your members, your communities, particularly the younger generation, which is something, so we should speak about that, and some of you have, because I think to have a room full of students and people in their 20s and 30s here for an evening with Ashley would be very powerful, and there are people here that would work with me, I know, to convene that. So all that remains for me to do is all that remains for you to do is to firstly give Ashley a huge show of love and appreciation. I want to thank Adriana, who
Thank you, Adriana.
Everyone has someone who works so hard behind the scenes, and Adriana is an incredible woman who I've got to meet. Obviously, wonderful production team and our ushers, and is it Montana? Donatella, sorry, I got the name wrong, our photographer. I'm going to ask you one chutzpahdik favour just at the end. So if you come around this way, I'm going to ask you, if you could, I'm going to stand up at the end and get a photo with Ashley with that in the background, because it's completely unprofessional and I'm allowed to do it. So what I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to allow Ashley in a moment to go backstage. It's tempting to then rush to the stage and speak to her, but we're going to give her a chance to go and take a couple of minutes to decompress, and then she'll come out. I would love you to continue your conversations together with people maybe you don't know or don't get to speak too much, out there, out in the piazza. You don't have to go on the beach, out in the cafe, have those conversations. Ashley will come out for a little bit before she has to be whisked away. So I'm going to say, because she'll probably feel like she's being rude when she has to leave. She's not. She's got another appointment to get to speak at. So please, we're going to stand up and we'll give her one last huge round of applause. And then if you want, And I said it before, I'm just going to remind you again, you know, anything that was in this room, and you tweet about it and you put it on social media, that's great. When you go in there, if you're having a conversation with Ashley, it's a